welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. This is a very special, awesome meeting tonight, and I'm not going to spend too much time at the beginning, going on about announcements and things like that. DJ is not here tonight. He is in Yosemite camping with his family, so he's missing out on all the fun. But hey, you got to have some quality time with the family every once in a while. One announcement I do want to make before we get started is, if you haven't not heard, Adobe Max will be free and online again this year. So I encourage everybody to sign up for it and attend some of the sessions. If you didn't do Adobe Max, I just out of curiosity, how many people did Adobe Max last year when it was online for free? Show of hands. Okay, well, I need to see more hands next time. So this October, trust me, it is really, really good. And for free and online, you cannot beat that. So definitely check it out.
Well, you definitely want to watch Sneaks for sure. Mitch, did they announce who the Sneaks person
I haven't
is?
seen that yet, no.
Yeah, it's always pretty exciting. We had Leonard Nimoy one year, but we have all these different people that come out and host this thing. And Sneaks, if you don't know, that is technology that may or may not make it into apps. A lot of times they do, like the new Roto Brush 2. If you saw that in After Effects, it was shown about 3 years before it was released. And we've got Project Voco, which is still in development. That was on there. So pretty neat stuff. And I happen to know that this year there's going to be some really good surprises. If you ever do make Max, by the way, it is an event where you come in, grab a beer, grab wine, grab soda, in a huge kind of Coliseum type environment or theater type environment, and just watch engineers show you stuff they've been working on. And it's a little bit of a roast sometimes when things crash or don't work, but it's a lot of fun. So if you want to watch one event, watch Sneaks. And by the way, if you're curious, just go to YouTube and type in Adobe Adobe Max Sneaks, whatever year you want, 2018, 2020, and you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. But there are just some amazing technologies. And I'll give you another one. We have one that allows you to take a picture like on the side of a taco truck, was one demo they did. And so it might be like a Mexican painted font, that's all done with, the Day of the Dead skulls or whatever. And somehow someone has turned it into fonts. You select that, click a button, and it makes you an entire alphanumeric font set from those one set of pictures. Like all of a sudden you've got these custom fonts, and that they actually released in the public. It's out in the wild, just like a little, go check this thing out.
Where is that found?
It's not Fantasy. I'm trying to remember the name. Send me a note, Eric, and I'll send you the link, because it's. But anyway, that's the kind of stuff you look at it and you're like, all right, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Is Project Voco, is that the one that they showed a few years ago? And maybe I'm confusing with something else. The one in Audition where you could sample, is that still in development?
Still in development. So just to tell the group what it does, and it could be dangerous, right? So I'm trying to remember, who did we had Jordan Peele, I think. Was that who it was? Yeah. This was, by the way, before he became uber famous. This was like about 6 months before that his movie dropped. That kind of set him on a new path. And anyway, they took his voice, had him just say a couple of words, and they also had done some sample voice scanning. You need about, I want to say, it was
like 20 minutes or so, wasn't it?
Yeah, like 20 minutes or 20 paragraphs or whatever it was. They did it. And then once they do that, they capture your voice, and they can make him say, I think they made him say something like, "And I kissed my dog" over and over again or something. So they just type it in there and it's his voice. And the idea was you can use it for ADR. And then, so you wouldn't need Ryan Reynolds to jump in and have to do a voiceover for the Singapore edit for Deadpool, right? Because they have to kind of clean that up a little bit, and you can make them say, pansies and roses or whatever you need him to say, rather than what was probably coming out of his mouth in Deadpool. So that was kind of the idea. And it absolutely works. We've got a ton of stuff coming out in speech to text, and so hopefully we'll see it with that. There was another one we have, which is an remover, which is pretty amazing with how it tunes out the video. Would either speed up the video or slow it down to keep everything in sync, so you don't get an unusual pause, what we call time tuner, and some other things kind of in that. So all of that stuff's in development. Anyway, that's just a hook to get you in, or go check out YouTube for Adobe Sneaks. And just back to your point, Eric. So.
Well, I can't sell Adobe Max any better than that. So with that being said,
free, because it's normally $1,200 or $800 if you know someone at Adobe and you get a discount.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. The free part of it is the big.
Oh, because there's a lot of alcohol, soda, food.
Never-ending food and drink.
Never-ending food. They feed you the entire time, and it's just there. You're just hanging out with a bunch of hopefully like-minded people. So
yeah, the event, if you actually do go to the physical event, hopefully, which will be back in 2022, it's definitely worth checking out. But yeah, the online, and I think they keep the online presentations up for, I thought last year they did it for like a year or like a
because we get a lot of a lot of stars. We had Ron Howard one year. I mean, there's always, and I think there's certain contracts for how long you can keep that stuff up, because you're probably paying by the minute, by the view, for some of the people that they have. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
well, yeah, I know. I was thinking more along the lines of the sessions that are, where you could teach and stuff like that. So anyway, but yes, Adobe Max this October. As we get closer to the date, I will definitely post stuff up. So, keep that in mind. But I'm just going to start this meeting off because we've got two very special people with us tonight, Dave Helmly, Mitch Wood from Adobe, to talk about hardware performance, getting Premiere to run its best on your system. And I know this is something that has come up in multiple meetings in the past. So I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to turn it over to Dave and let him go at it. If you have questions, post them in the chat pod. I'll try to get them to Dave throughout the meeting, and maybe we'll just do a Q&A session. Try to keep things as, I know some of you might have specific issues to your particular computer. I want you to be able to ask those questions. That's fine, but we can't spend too much time on any one particular problem. So, feel free to ask those questions. But if I say, hey, we need to keep moving or kind of speed things up just because we're getting too far into the weeds, please understand. But yeah, I want to try to make sure everybody gets their question asked. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Dave Helmly. In case you're wondering who Dave is, he's basically been at Adobe since, I don't know, what did you say, 25 years?
Yep.
And the guy is probably one of the smartest guys there, along with Mitch and some of the other people there I know really know Premiere inside and out. So with that being said, Dave, take it away.
Thanks. So a couple things. One, I think it was Jordan that had said, hey, Conan was great last year. So I will share something with you that came out of Team Coco that was actually a theme for our team. So I'll tell you a story about that in a second. But I'll tell you where I'm at with Adobe. So again, as Eric had said, been here a long time. I think we were probably less than 1,000 employees when I joined. Pretty small company. My brethren over there, Mitch, are you 22 years? Is that what I remember?
22, yeah.
Yeah, 22. And, it's a great place to work. And I'll tell you what makes it different than other products that are out there, even within Adobe, certainly in the video family, because people do tend to stay a long time. So my job, for the last number of years, and I've had lots of different roles from running different teams and different places, but, we now have what's called a strat dev team, and we just interact with customers. And if you've wondered why Premiere is just kind of shot up like a rocket, it's a lot of it just has to do with, even when Final Cut 7 was in its heyday, a great product, right? Two of them were kind of neck and neck for the longest time. There wasn't really any reason to switch until maybe one point in time, people decided that they liked the older look better. I'll just keep it that. And there was definitely a spike, but at the same time, what really Mitch and I, and there's only 12 of us worldwide that support it this way. We just take your feedback and we watch what goes on and say, we need this, and this in order to make this product sing. So for example, we hired a guy in Hollywood, Mike, who has the Oscar for Titanic. I think Mike has been with us, probably close to 18 years, I think Mitch. And his sole purpose in life was to get Premiere tuned for Hollywood. And so I thought this was important since we're going to talk about tuning today. And we didn't even present it to people in Hollywood for nearly 5 years because we knew there was a ton of things that needed to happen to Premiere from the CS3 days kind of forward. So just so you guys know, we do the same with broadcast. Mitch spends a lot of time with me. I kind of manage a lot of the broadcast accounts, the TV stuff. And what do we need to do to really make it work for news agencies? And we pretty much work with them all. So that's just a little bit about what we do. I tend to be the performance nerd. As I was talking to Eric when I kind of came on, I run a complete lab here in my office. There's just a ton of equipment here that I can click on any machine pretty much and get to probably anything but Linux, I think, Mitch. But however we need to run it, and Mitch and I will do a lot of screen shares with customers and figure things out, a lot of performance tuning, those types of things. So we're going to definitely take time to get some of your questions answered. And, hopefully we get some good ones. I guess when you ask a question, try to figure out how, just to help things go along, to Eric's point, whether or not you think it's going to benefit a lot of the other the other group members that are here. And doesn't mean we won't get to that question, but just think about that. And if you have a real specific question that is just kind of killing you, and hopefully I'll go over some of this today. Hopefully we'll give you some remedies, because there are certain ways that a lot of these video apps work. And again, we're always going to engineering saying some of these things like cache and stuff need to clear out automatically. And I'm going to talk a lot about that tonight. And Mitch, by the way, one thing that might be interesting to mention just before I start the prezo is, did we ever get clarification on my request for if you open up a new an old project and a newer version of Premiere, say you go from 14 to 15, that it automatically kind of does that Helmly script or wipes things out?
So that has gotten a lot of attention, but no one has made any commitments yet.
Okay.
So it's not going to be in our next release or the Max release, but hopefully sometime soon thereafter.
So what we're talking about, and again, this is going to fit in well to this conversation tonight. One of the things that really want to make you, smash your fist into your screen sometimes, and I've been there, when cache gets stale, right? So you're working in Premiere, you've upgraded to a newer version, you do something on playback, and playback gets wonky, right? And it has a lot to do, depending on the media. ProRes really doesn't have this problem, but if you happen to use H.264, when we're building those cache files out, because remember, that's a highly compressed format, we have to create iframes for that. When we switch to a newer version and we've optimized it for Metal or AMD or NVIDIA, the older files are really not valid. They work, but they just don't play back right, because the math that we calculated those with versus the new decode math, they don't line up and it's not perfect. So one of the things I'm going to show you tonight, if you weren't aware, is you can't just go to preferences and clear cache. That doesn't work. It's very different. And again, we're going to make this easier for you because it won't clear the cache out for anything that's currently in use. And that's really very important to know, because you're like, my project's not working the way that it should, and you clear cache and it still doesn't work. Well, that's because we're reserving that cache because you're in that project. So you actually have to close all projects before you clear cache. So anyway, this is a goat rodeo, right? So one of the things that Mitch and I are really pushing hard on engineering, and again, he and I are sort of one step away from the people that are programming it, is to say it just needs to be easier. One click and go. So hopefully we'll have some good news there for you. But today we're gonna just kind of get into the prezos and hopefully we'll cover some of this. And by the way, while I'm going full screen here, Eric, if someone has a good question that's related to the slide, or Mitch, either one of you guys can chime in. Let me know, because I won't be able to see it. So
will do.
Let me just pop over and share screen. So I know that was a lot of setup time, but I thought it was important. And just by the way, it's screen sharing okay?
Looks great.
It's good, nice and messy. Okay, this is just for Jordan. So this Freddie Mercury playback engine, since you talked about Team Coco, just want to let you know that that came out of Team Coco. And Mitch will remember this. We actually had shirts made at Adobe with this on the back for one NAB. So there was a video where the Conan Team Coco, was talking about switching to Premiere Pro from Final Cut. And it was just hilarious. And they had said, it's got this new thing called the Freddie Mercury playback engine, which of course we have no license to. But anyway, our entire team wore these shirts at NAB, and we're sitting at one of the buffets one year, and they thought we were a band, and they asked what time we were playing. And I think someone at dinner said, well, we'll be right over there at 9 o'clock. Come out and see us play. Anyway, little story since you had mentioned that.
One quick note to interject. One of the guys in that video, Rob Ash, will be our presenter at next month's meeting.
Yep. And by the way, I sent Rob one of those shirts. So you ask him about that Freddie Mercury playback engine shirt, because I sent one to him, because he was the guy that actually said that, Eric. You're absolutely right. Rob's a great guy. Very smart guy. Okay, so this is a presentation, just so you know, and we're going to keep this loose because I actually have this up on YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel, and the reason is because we had so many people that come after us about a lot of these particular questions. I just decided to take this PowerPoint, yak for about 5 minutes on each topic, and then throw it up on YouTube. So just so you guys know, you can actually get to this this presentation. So this is what I'm going to blow through kind of quick. These are kind of the quick areas that are really key to sort of the mantra or the religion of how Premiere and After Effects work. I'm going to assume that everybody does have a general knowledge of GPU and general knowledge of hardware, because it is pretty important. Apple M1 does change things a little bit that we're working on, and we can kind of take that as we go. So the first thing that we always have to tell people is absolutely don't pay attention to the minimum specs. And we actually got the group to actually, commit to the recommended specifications. Minimum is really just going to be, for very minimal editing. And this kind of brings me to the M1, because if you know the M1 Max, a lot of them that people were buying have 8 gigs of RAM. So we are optimizing Premiere for that M1, and it's running great, by the way. And we did just release Audition for Mac M1. But one of the issues is, as you can imagine, and this would probably be the same for ARM for Windows, right? 8 gigs sounds like a lot until you see what the operating system starts to throw at it, right? So it's kind of like how much room is really left there for Premiere, plugins, codecs, and if you've got email open, or Chrome can be a beast sometimes, taking resources. So it's still, and Mitch and I talk about this, it's still a little unknown whether or not 8 gigs is ever going to be recommended, even on M1 and ARM, which are supposed to be lighter on resources. So minimum, 16 gig. I like to see people at 32 gigs. That's just a good system. RAM's cheap. And the other thing to really pay attention to here is we only support the last 2 major versions of software. This has a lot to do with security, just so you know. There's changes, and we can't test all of the equipment all the time. It doesn't mean it won't work. And a lot of times, Mitch and I'll get on the phone with people and help them along with a version that they have. And I'll just be honest with you, you just have to keep up as best you can. So again, and this is changing all the time. So just a quick note on that. System compatibility report is a perfect example of us sort of, really just going back to engineering and saying, the number one problem we have typically is GPU drivers, especially on Windows. We did have one thing on Mac that I can recall, but it was fixed fairly quick on Apple's side. There was an Intel graphic that I know kept Mitch up many hours with customers trying to narrow this down. This report, when it comes up, you can turn it off in the preferences if you want to live with this sort of red badge of honor that's there. We leave that there on purpose. Like I see Michael smiling there. The reason is we have to leave it there is we want you to know while you're editing, you probably want to save often. And also to remind you if you're in a 2-hour edit. And by the way, we don't want to keep you out of that edit because you got work to do. We just want to give you some idea. You need to figure this out, right? You either got to get on the forums or you got to jump out there, go to Adobe. You can click on this export report button. It'll tell you lots of good facts about your system. We've pretty much got this honed in. This list, by the way, updates itself whenever you phone home with Creative Cloud. So if there's an update, it'll go up and grab whatever the latest information is, because if we found a bug, which we have for some of the VDI stuff on some of the NVIDIA Tesla stuff, and a couple other drivers where we're like, yep, this driver's bad. So we'll flag that one. And I will also say, if your driver's working, don't change it until you get a flag. You'll have to change it once or twice a year. I do have a lot of new editors that come out to go, oh, there's an update, so I'm just going to update my NVIDIA driver, and chances are by the way, it will rarely, if never, make your system faster. All you're going to do is take a risk that something's not going to work right, because again, if they change math on their side, now that we're using NVIDIA and AMD decode. And again, Windows is great because it gives you all these choices. Apple's very controlled. We see it a little less on Apple. So you really just need to pay attention definitely on Windows. And Mitch, because this is an important topic. Did I leave anything out that you wanted to add?
Well, just be sure and check out those little fix buttons, because they really will help you. They will take you to the Adobe website. They'll tell you what driver is recommended. They'll provide a link to that driver. So within a couple of clicks, you can be downloading the right driver and get it installed.
Yeah.
So those things are very useful. And we try to, now also the little export report button down at the bottom, Dave touched on that. If you export that out, it'll give you a lot of information, not only about your system, but about your project as well. And write a little text file to your desktop that you can open up and read. So those things can be very useful when you're trying to troubleshoot problems or just understand what's going on in general with your system. Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing that we work really, really hard on is, and we're working with Dell, Lenovo, Puget, HP, Apple, pretty much everybody, and trying to break down editing and just video creation, compositions and so forth, but in 4 basic areas as starting points. And I call these personas. You're going to start to see these 4 personas, and they're already starting to pop up everywhere. Simple edit, news, creative edit, promo graphics, and long form. So if you were to go to someone's site and they say, hey, we're Adobe ready, hopefully they've picked one of these 4 categories as a start for you to figure out what's good for me. Because if I just sort of break it down, you can kind of read along with me here. Cores versus clock speed, we're going to talk a lot about in just a second. How many displays, third-party I/O, codecs can be a complete headache, because we have what I call, this is just my term, CPU enhanced, which usually means it's asynchronous. And we'll get to that in a second. And then, of course, shared storage. So I kind of have dug into this a little bit. And again, just remember, this prezo is up on YouTube for you guys to snag as well if you want. So I hope this helps, because this is when Eric and I were talking about how to sort of kick things back off with your group. I thought this would be a good place to start. A news and simple edit system, 8 cores. You don't need to go bananas and try to get, a really good system that's great for World of Warcraft and it's going to make your editing any faster. If you don't do that kind of editing, then probably don't spend the money on that. Some of the critical things to get, you'll notice all of the personas have NVMe. And again, I think we're all pretty familiar with that. If you're running, a system that you built yourself, which I have several here that I built myself as well, you're going to want to start swapping some of those out for NVMe. Even if you have SATA SSD, you're going to find NVMe that fits in the PCI slot to be a lot better as your boot and cache drive. Just so you know, we've seen it. It's the difference between night and day for lots of different projects. So anyway, you can kind of read there, 4 gigs of RAM. That's kind of the recommended spec over there under News and Simple Edit. And then you kind of jump into a creative edit, which is a combination of News and Simple Edit. You can kick up to 16 core because you're going to get pretty good benefit out of Premiere with that. Which remember, that's 32 threads. For spending your money, you don't need to go in any higher than 16 core. I mean, you could go to 18. It's a little better, but it's not linear. 12 is a good middle number, 12, 14, but 16 is pretty much what I tell a lot of people. That also includes some of the newer Ryzen stuff. I don't recommend dual Xeons. I have several of them here. They do work, but a lot of the newer apps don't support the memory management, which is known as NUMA. And you don't really get the benefit of having 2, say gold Xeon processors with tons of cores, because it's not going to scale linearly. You might get 3% better now that you spend an extra $5,000 on a second processor. You know what I'm saying? So when you really want to think about, you're going to build this machine yourself, if it's mainly for editing and content creation, stick with a no more than an 18, but 14, 16, 12 is going to be fine. So yeah.
Two quick questions. So first off,
Sure,
so basically what you're saying is cores are more important, or clock speed on a CPU is more important than cores.
Only for After Effects. I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. And then can you define NVMe for some folks who may not know what that is?
Yeah. So NVMe, so SSD, right? NVMe looks like a memory stick. So NVMe is just basically a hard drive that is actually memory. So all the new laptops have NVMe, and people always used to say, certainly early on, because Apple was an early adopter of NVMe, but they kind of had their own version of it. And the Macs, for example, would boot in under 15 seconds, which was crazy back then. Now pretty much everybody's gone to this, and all of the desktops now use NVMe. Some of them will have fins on them if they tend to be bigger and they need some cooling. But and they're also pretty inexpensive. I mean, you could get a 1 terabyte, NVMe for $100 now. I mean, it's crazy fast. When you do a speed test on it, you'll get about 2,600 or higher. It just depends on your bus speed. So yeah, thanks for that, Eric. So you'll see that when I go to Creative Edit, I've raised this to 2 terabytes. That's just because you'll probably have a lot more applications. You could get away with 1 terabyte there. But the reason I have it spelled out this way is this is where you should be spending your money. Go nice, even system. Don't go heavy one way or the other. If you're just trying to stay within a certain budget. Now, promo graphics really has more to do with After Effects. And After Effects, the only thing After Effects really cares about today, except for the beta, is clock speed, because After Effects is a single threaded app for the majority of the program. There's a couple things in there that are multi-threaded today, and it's been that way forever, which is why people run pretty cool products like Render Garden and all these other things, which can kind of send After Effects frames to multiple cores. The new version of After Effects, and if we get time, I can certainly show you how it works. The new version of After Effects, if you have 16 cores, will just throw out or even 16 threads, or up to 32 for the most part. It will just send out 32 frames, and it's blazingly fast. So the new version of After Effects will use multi-threading, what we call, multi-frame render, the same way Premiere does. They work a little different, but the one difference on After Effects is After Effects wants cores plus clock speed. So I'll give you an example. We had one customer had a ton of cores and his clock speed was 2.2. And he put it up against his Mac, and that was a Windows machine, put it up against his Mac. That was like an 8 core, so it'd be 16 threads. And it was running at, I don't know, 3.8. And the Mac just annihilated it. And he thought it was because, the Mac is better. And we're like, it's not that. You got to look at the numbers. It has to do with that the Mac is just spitting out twice as fast as the PC was for that clock speed. So clock speed for After Effects is incredibly important, even in the new version coming out. And again, it's in beta today that anybody here can download. Cores plus that. We are seeing, just like I talked about, when you get past 32 cores, which would be 64 threads, it starts to really fall off. It is faster if you have, like I have a 128 Ryzen here. It's definitely faster than say a 64, but it's not twice as fast, if that makes sense. Because by the time we divide up those frames, there isn't enough for After Effects to really do once the traffic cop kind of puts everything back together. So, I find, 64 threads for After Effects is pretty good. And again, if you keep it around 16 cores, 32 threads, good value for your money. The GPU memory is high here. If you weren't aware, After Effects uses VRAM off the GPU for real-time playback. So when you hit the RAM preview, it's using the graphics card. If you wanted to spend an enormous amount of money on a crazy, insanely fast graphics card, chances are you're wasting your money, because there's a lot of the math that's done with these effects and stuff. It just depends on the effect. Don't really take into account the clock speed and the cores that are on that GPU. They do to a certain point, but it falls off fairly quick. VRAM is usually more important for After Effects, and we can certainly dig into that. I do find that the 2080 is a solid performer on the NVIDIA side. Obviously, the 3080, I'm running some of those as well. They're great. 3090, I don't know if you guys have seen that thing. That thing's a beast. Most computers, it's even hard to fit it in there. I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between the two of those cards, even inside of After Effects, unless you needed the RAM. That's in there. So that's kind of where we are with this screen here. Long form just has to do with a lot of RAM. The more RAM you had, it helps it load, like for documentaries and stuff. It helps the timeline open up quicker and allow you to zoom around the timeline a little quicker. So that's where RAM kind of really comes into play. And then a couple other things. Depending on the codecs, pretty much now everything has quick sync in it, which is the Intel technology that allows you to play H.264, H.265. We also now have released NVIDIA, AMD, and of course we support Metal on the Mac. So depending on what you have in your system, it's going to use one or the other. So you'll find H.264, H.265 playback to be pretty smooth these days in most new systems. I'm a big believer in Thunderbolt 3, even on Windows. Of course, it could be Thunderbolt 4, just because it's a great way to move files around. So always a good idea to have that little $150 add-in card if you're on Windows and it supports it. And of course, 10 gig fiber. By the way, Eric, I thought I did have a picture in here. There's NVMe right there. If you just guys were just curious, there it is fitting in your laptop. I'm a big fan of some of the Lenovo laptops because they actually have 3 NVMe slots that you can just fill up, and it literally takes less than 3 minutes to pop it in there.
Dave, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second here.
Please do.
If you want to go back one slide. So now that we have integrated hardware decode and encode of H.264 in Premiere built into the application with NVIDIA and AMD and Intel. The VRAM on your card has become more important than it has been in previous releases. So we can actually use a lot more of that VRAM if you're working with H.264 or H.265 files, because we'll use it on the encode or on the decode side and on the encode. So we can just consume a lot of that VRAM.
Yeah, by the time you stack on effects and stuff, that's a good point. And that's another reason why we, again, for simple edit, 4 GB, which is pretty standard these days, but that's a good point. Again, just talked a little bit about when you're working in work groups. I use a lot of different servers here. QNAP is a great one. The main point for this is if you're trying to figure out, good ways to back up, and you want to run projects, which is what Mitch and I have to deal with all the time when people are like, this isn't working right. We're like, well, you're running off a 1 gig E on the server. So, you need to switch to a 10 gig E connection. I think for even groups like this, 10 gig E, as you guys know, it's just going to be built into all the new motherboards coming out anyway, eventually. So pretty much everyone's going to have this 10 gig E connection. And again, that's 10 times faster, just in simple terms. And 10 gig E and Thunderbolt 1 are the same speed, just so you know. So quick. And by the way, what you notice I don't have up there is don't ever edit off a USB if you can help it. I have a lot of people will have a USB RAID and they're like, oh, this is great. And I'm like, it's not. USB 3.1, right? The smaller connector definitely works better. So if you're on like the tightest budget in the world and you can get a RAID that's USB 3.1, it does work pretty good if you don't have a Thunderbolt port. But don't even use or a USB 3, because it does these burst modes, which will just make your timeline kind of go wonky on that. And again, really, you can really only use RAIDs if you're using any sort of spinning disk. Okay, let's talk about performance tuners. I'm a big believer in these apps. If you happen to have Dell, HP, or Lenovo, I do go out to their labs and periodically and join. I'm a member of all the advisory councils for all these companies, and their engineers do put a lot of time in to all the different apps that you see supported. Obviously, a lot of Adobe apps and other apps as well. So if you have any of these, go look at the Optimizer Tuner apps, because it's definitely worth the time. It will go out and make BIOS changes as well. And some, by the way, changes don't even require a reboot. So it's pretty slick when you go into these modes. So just wanted to mention that to you. Monitoring apps, gotta love them. I mean, they're really coming out great. Apple's got a really great one. I think Windows, you have to do a few more clicks to get in there, but this really helps us kind of see what's going on. And we're going to talk about this in just a second. This is a great screen here because you can see that I've got heavy GPU and the CPU is just kind of sitting there idle. Not really a whole lot going on there, which is really good to know, because I'll have some timelines in performance testing where I've got both just rocking the house. And that just means we've got really nice parallel processing going on, right? So when you look at this and you see, people want to see this GPU like maxed at 100%, and you actually don't if you can help it, because that means you're out of gas, right? If you're hitting the ceiling the whole time, then something's going to give at some point in time. So if you can get that thing up to about 80, 90%, you'll probably have a better system. And then down here, you could certainly have room for more GPU effects. And we're going to talk about how some of this gets there. Are you guys familiar with what's known as dog ears, or this overlay mode? Have you guys seen this before? This is a really, really important one. And I'll just go ahead and launch Premiere, because I think it's worth talking about. So we have this overlay mode. If you're like, and this is what Mitch and I'll do when we're talking to customers, we'll have them hit these magic keys that you hear, Control Shift F11 or Command Shift F11, and we'll have them play back. And even when it's on a server, which is a great test, it's going to tell us exactly what's going on the timeline. So if I pop this open here, let me see if I can grab a busier timeline here and see where that one. Lots of different projects here. I think maybe it must be in 13. Maybe this one. Okay, so just turn that down. So I'm going to bring this up full screen, and I've already have this turned on. So if I hit on the Mac, it's Command Shift F11. If you're on a laptop, you might have to hit the function key, by the way. And of course, Windows is Control Shift. So on the Mac, it's Command Shift F11. You just click it once, and when I hit play, it's going to disappear. Command Shift F11 again, it's going to turn it on. And you'll notice that this is a 4K full quality, and it's playing ProRes 422 because it tells you it's an imported QuickTime file. This is really cool because if I were to go to another timeline, let me just see if I go to this timeline down here, importer MPEG. This is telling me this is a 1920. You're at full quality. If you have multiple layers of video, so for example, if I came over here and did a picture-in-picture, like so, and let's just copy, copy, and I got to turn that layer on. Sorry about that. And I'll just paste that effect, paste attribute, sure. Now you'll notice when I bring it up, it's going to show you 2 layers of video. So this gets to be pretty important because as you start to build these timelines out, and I were to grab, you know, another piece of video, like grab some of these here and throw these down on the timeline, for example, then what might happen is I might come up here and I would have 3 layers of video if I'm doing a picture-in-picture. So this mode will tell you exactly what's happening and how fast your system is able to produce and render frames and what we're expecting to get out of that. So this particular one is we're expecting to get, you know, 25 frames out of that. So I thought I'd share, you know, dog ears mode with you because it is just one that will save you a lot of frustration in trying to figure out what's going on. If this, by the way, were to say down sample 2, that means you're at half res. Down sample 4 is quarter res. And it's been in the app, I think 10 years, Mitch, about that.
Yeah, I would say
a lot of people will be frustrated that that's been in there so long rather than just having that little red dot. So dog ears, a great way to really get to know what's going on with your system. I already talked about some of these technologies. So a few key components can absolutely make the difference. Quick sync, not all Intel processors, some Xeons workstations don't have quick sync. So the only way to get decent playback in H.264 is using an NVIDIA card or AMD. The old Mac Pro, you know, the round cylinder one, didn't have quick sync in it. And again, depending on what it's running, if it's running the newer OS, then Meta will take over, and you should have decent playback. And we have done lots of tuning for the T2 series as well as the Afterburner card, just so you guys know on that. We're always tweaking performance. Again, just a little bit of performance bars there. We have a team dedicated to performance on Premiere, always checking this out. A lot of this work kicked in for Premiere 14.2 and up. So performance notes. A lot of people don't realize that you can actually have too many displays connected. You saw in my office, I just used the ultra wide displays. You're kind of better to have one ultra wide display and then maybe a confidence monitor off to the side if you want to go full screen out. So I normally say two monitors is pretty good. I have been in some offices where they just have way too many monitors and they're not realizing that GPU, to Mitch's point, has got to fill in all those pixels. If you have an older graphics card, a lot of changes in the last couple of years too, and we really do tune towards the newer cards. Anyway, things are working pretty good right now. I've been pretty happy with all these different performance tweaks, and this was one that we worked on with NVIDIA for NV Inc. For NVIDIA Encode, and then also Decode. So just some great work, and we've got all that done for AMD as well. Afterburner, if you guys have used any of those, it only supports decode and playback. Does not help anything when it comes to encode. So I have a lot of Apple customers who ask me all the time, and I'm like, it's not us, it's Apple. So it only works with ProRes files. So just a little note on that. All right, so now we'll start getting into a little bit of the meat of it. Again, just to get everybody on the same page. if you weren't aware what effects have GPU capabilities or which one's enabled, you click on the little plugin icon up here and say, just show me what's accelerated. All the ones that come up are accelerated. For the most part, this has been around for a while. We've pretty much got all the important ones done. After Effects will have pretty much the same ones where it makes sense. So this feature is also inside of After Effects. So let's talk nuts and bolts here. So a couple things to understand when you're picking out GPU cards. There are codecs which are very specific to GPU. So Red, R3D, H.264, HEVC, and ProRes RAW. Those are the only 4 today, and I'll update this as time goes on, that actually take advantage of the GPU. So if you're using any of those files and you're putting different types of effects on top of that, to Mitch's point, you're starting to get to the resources on that card. We do support multiple GPUs and a desktop configuration. We often say, make sure they're running the same driver to keep things simple. And they do have to be the same pairing. So NVIDIA or AMD on that. So we can get into that in just a second. CPU enhanced codec, which just means that extra work has been done to really fine tune these on your CPU. ProRes is really rocking the house, even on Windows. It's really great. We've done some really great work with Apple on that. Avid DNX is really, really fine-tuned as well. ARI and XDCAM working great for that. So a couple things, when you're trying to look at performance, ask yourself, are they GPU or CPU based effects? It gets to be really, really important to know if you're wondering why you're stuttering. When you run out of RAM on the graphics card, we force it back to CPU. Then all of a sudden your performance kind of goes down a little bit. So we don't really support any more than 3 GPUs. So we kind of just basically say 3 GPUs. And I can tell you why. It's basically, there's no power supply that I could find in a standard desktop that would support more than 3 decent graphics cards anyway. And I have had people that have put 3 sort of crappy graphics cards in there. And I'm like, that's a waste of time. You'd be much better to throw those out and get one really good one. Right. So it's not a matter of just how much stuff can you stuff in there. So just to make a point on that. And the other thing I always like to point out is that heat affects performance. So the hotter it gets, and if you built your own system and it's not cooling down, the system itself and the GPU will throttle down. We've definitely seen that affect Premiere. Okay. Something that is a bit of a mystery when I talk to a lot of customers, and I always have to tell them, pay attention to color. When Premiere throws a color like on a badge or up here, 9 times out of 10, people get all these colors wrong, except for rendered, because they had to wait for that one. The yellow line, for the most part, is going to tell you that it's a performance line, and we'll get to that one in just a second. I guess we're talking about badges on this slide. So gray badges, no effects. Yellow badge. And again, at a glance, when you look at your timeline and you're trying to figure out what's going on there, we're trying to give you some indication that you've applied intrinsic effects, motion, opacity, speed. And then purple means that, and there's an example of what that is. Purple is basically some plugin has been applied, either ours or in some cases a third-party plugin. And then green is a combination of yellow and purple. And I will just say, for the record, I tried to get yellow and green make blue, because I think we all grew up with that. I think I was vetoed on that one, Mitch, because I think things should make sense. But logical. Green basically means you've got both effects applied. So here I have a scale, and down here I have a lumetry. This isn't critical, but it is nice when you understand at a glance what those 3 badges mean. And I will give you a little glimpse into the future. We will be taking a close look at all of these badges and what they mean, and actually giving you some more information very soon. So just so you know.
Do you have the 5th badge?
One of the things that people may or may not know is when you have a purple badge with a red underline, this happens a lot when you're dealing with raw material, that means you've applied a master clip And for this Cascadia teaser file, any place where that clip is used in my entire project, doesn't make a difference which sequence, there is a color adjustment that's been made at the master level. And you might have seen this master control and the effects controls when you're applying effects. That means that in this case, this Alexa LUT will affect that clip at a global level within that project. So again, at a glance, just trying to tell you what's happening there. So what do the sequence colored lines mean? Blank, and this gets to be important, and I know it's a bit of an eye chart to read that. You know, this is basically saying that we're going to treat this file right here at this point in time as its own preview file. We think we can play those frames and it should just go. So playback will play back directly from the original media source. And this gets back to the cache files we're going to talk to in just a second. So we're pretty sure that that'll play back in real time based on what's going on. Yellow is what I call, again, this is my term, performance indicator. And it's basically saying that it's CPU or GPU optimized. And you'll notice when you start to stack things on top of it, the line will change color. And in some cases, if you render to a different codec and do a render and replace, the line could go from blank to yellow if you've got a codec that supports that. And anyway, you can kind of see what it says here. We're going to render the frame and prefetch those frames right before the CTI is current time marker. Before the current time indicator hits that, we're able to preload that. Again, faster GPU will definitely help that. Red does not necessarily mean it won't play back in real time. So one thing that drives me bananas when I'm at a lot of customer sites, and unless they just get paid by the hour, I don't know, people will hit the enter key and then just wait for the daggone thing to render. It doesn't mean that it won't play in real time. A lot of times it won't. It again depends on what's going on, which is why I think we need another color. We kind of need an orange or something else in there, where red should truly mean stop, it's got to render, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means that it's just not being flagged by one of those other things, or again, it's a non-GPU effect has been applied on that codec. So red is definitely one of those things to test out first. And obviously green means you pre-rendered that. If you didn't know that we have this feature in Premiere, which means it gets very handy in documentaries, where I just want to know, have I used this clip before or any portion of this clip? So you'll see here on this clip here that this section right here has been duplicated here. So we're saying that those frames were reused in another part, or it could just be the whole clip. However, one of the things that we have seen is whenever you have a 2-hour timeline or a long timeline, if you have a lot of those things like repeat indicator turned on, it's got to draw those out. So we normally tell people, toggle it on or off as needed, and you get to that under the menu item. So preferences are one of those things we should definitely talk about, and I'll probably have Mitch join in just a second. So one of the things that's brand new is HDR support. By the way, we just released DirectX 12 for Windows HDR support. I think that came out, was it this week, Mitch, or last week?
On the 10th.
So we're pretty excited about that, which basically means if you have an HDR display connected, a new button appears. And of course, with Apple, it's only going to work in the latest OS. So you gotta be running Big Sur. There's a button that says HDR. So you can click on it. This button talks to this button inside Premiere Pro, this extended dynamic range monitoring, that all of a sudden that monitor will show you HDR beautiful inside the program monitor. And same on Windows. Obviously, Windows, it's going to be in a different place under display. But this is a fantastic feature. And I just think that HDR is going to be just like HD. It's going to be no big deal. It's like, yep, it looks better. I definitely want to do that. So, and of course, with Apple's monitor, works pretty great on that, as well as any of these HP or LG monitors that have HDR support. Okay, so on audio, one of the things that we definitely get into, and Mitch, certainly feel free to chime in. One of the things that can save you a lot of time is to turn off this button here that says automatic waveform generation. You don't need them as much as you think you do. You're like, well, hold on, Dave, I'd like to kind of see what my waveforms are doing. If you turn that off, we will generate them on the fly as you need them. Right. So if you put your time marker there, it'll just build it out for that clip, especially if you have a really, really long edit and you're just like, I just need to get in and fix something. You can turn this button off and then get right to it and not wait for sort of the waveform generation to catch up. And we also find that this helps when you're on a server environment and you're trying to make everything run off the server. When you're on VDI, AWS, or you're running LucidLink, Cloud NAS and those types of things, turn that off. And then we did change some things for audio where we now have system default, and we're going to talk a lot about third-party IO. Anything else on there, Mitch, that you think is worth mentioning?
Sort of. It's a little bit off subject.
Or I've completely bored you and you're asleep.
No, can you hear me?
Okay, Mitch
Can you hear me?
Pop back.
Mitch is there.
So obviously auto saves, those things will definitely take cycles from you. So figure out how often you want to save. If you are having weird issues and you have control surface things added, that's just one thing to be aware. Just remember that. They're usually pretty good, but they do update drivers depending on operating system versions. And of course, third-party IO, always be aware when that happens. It's always best to disconnect it if you're troubleshooting on any of that. So
hey, Dave.
This is a pretty busy slide because we spend a lot of time working with all of our partners between AJA, Bluefish, and Blackmagic, and of course NewTek and NDI, just ways to get the signals to a different display. We do have a lot of people, by the way, that are now just using HDMI 2.1, 2.0. It works pretty great, but there are reasons where a lot of times you need third-party hardware. These things have actually gotten much better over time, but there are definitely some settings in here that you just want to be aware of that can cause things to go completely out of whack and have latency issues on there. One of the things that I have also seen is if you install NDI on there, NDI defaults to on. So you want to make sure that if you're not using it, you go turn it off, because again, it'll send that. And by the way, for those that don't know what transmit is, this is sort of what we call Mercury transmit. It's how you send it to the signal to another display, full screen. So this slide is really just talking to. I cannot hear you guys. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Sorry, Mitch.
Oh, better. Okay.
Let's have my volume down. Thanks for that, Eric. Sorry, Mitch. Go ahead.
It was just it's really kind of off topic. You were showing the preferences for audio, and one of my favorite things there is the little checkbox you have for.
Which one was it? Sorry.
You had it there. Go back one. Right
there.
Stop right there.
Oh, got it.
The little checkbox for maintain pitch while shuttling. So a lot of people don't realize this, but there is a keyboard shortcut for that you can turn that on and off on the fly, because sometimes I really want to hear that audio while I'm scrubbing, and other times it's just making me insane. So if you do a Shift S, it'll toggle it on or off. And then you can just continue working. So you don't have to stop, go into your preferences and uncheck that box, and then go back into the preferences and recheck that box. So yeah, and just a little tip. It's not exactly on topic, but to
your point, what actually affects a lot of things is you'll see we have a button here that says don't select third-party IO, because that you kind of naturally say, oh, this needs to go out to the Blackmagic or to the AJA, and you actually control that really on this busier screen here through their control panel app is really what that's telling. The control panel app will kind of map all that for you. So Now let's talk about cache files, because I sort of talked about this before. There's a new way of cleaning the cache files, and I think I have a slide on that. I do, so I'll get to that in just a second. So for quick cleaning of cache files, you can absolutely just click the button. To me, I kind of think that that's a little useless. If you're going to clean them, you might as well do a deep clean. You can automatically delete cache files. We did run into a problem a number of years ago with this feature. Some people were putting things like in root directories, and they were putting files and cache files and document folders and places like that. So we try to give you a little bit of warning. I like this feature, and a lot of our customers will say, automatically wipe things out that are older than certain days. I basically say, if you're done with a project, wipe the cache. Again, we are looking to automate some of this for you. So this is what I was referring to, probably worth a screenshot here. This is how you actually clean cache correctly. So the key thing is launch Premiere. You cannot have any projects open. And actually, Mitch corrected me the other day, right? Mitch, you got to make sure AME doesn't have anything open. Probably best just to quit AME and to quit After Effects. Just make sure that whatever is open, none of those resources are active in any of those programs. So probably best just to quit those apps. Again, launch Premiere and then go to Preferences Media Cache. When you click that button, you get a new option that lights up that says delete all media cache. And when you do that, I've seen it, by the way, take 15 minutes on some of the older systems that were out there. Of course, with NVMe, it's a little quicker than that, because it really does a deep cleaning. It would probably take typically maybe 20 seconds if you've never done it. But wow, you will get some disk space back, and then your system will just work better. The other thing you can do is Command Shift click on Premiere will wipe out prefs and plugin cache, or I think on Windows, Mitch, is Control Shift click.
It's no, Alt Shift.
Alt Shift, sorry. Yeah, so yeah. Alt Shift, click on the application, hold it down, a little box will pop up. Maybe I'll do that in a second for you. And say it basically resets Premiere. So when you do a media cache, and then you click on Premiere with these keys held down, it will automatically reset all the plugin cache. And you'll know it's done right because it takes Premiere twice as long to open, because it's got to load plugins and build a clean cache file out for just the plugins. And it also doesn't remember any of the previous projects you were working on, so you have to go find them because the list is gone. But that's a true reset.
We'll warn you that if you've got a lot of Boris effects and Red Giant effects and Sycor effects, and you've been installing plugins from every vendor on the planet, you will end up cursing us if you hold down the Shift key when you launch, because we do have to go through and reparse every one of those plugins.
Yeah. So here's an example. Again, Mitch is right. It's my brain. Sorry, guys. It is Option Shift or Alt Shift. Hold it down, open the app, and then it says, "Are you sure you want to reset your plugin caches and preferences?" So just a great one. And we have seen that when actually we were on a call earlier this week where someone was having a major meltdown on a project, and it absolutely fixed their problems. It just deletes the old preference file and took care of it. Again, I think we need an easier way to do that. We're working on that for you. So just wanted to let you know. I did talk about this before. Why is this important? Again, I talk about the math can change on how we decode codecs. So old cache files would be created one way, and then we come out with a newer way to read H.264, H.265 files. They don't exactly match. They're still playable, but they're not optimized. So that's why you want to do that. I would just get in the habit of doing this whenever you think about it. Performance storage, we don't really recommend sending peak files and cache files out to shared storage. A lot of people want to do that, especially if you're dealing with a lot of GoPro type MP4 files where it has to create those iframes. my opinion, if you're working on a documentary or something that has a lot of H.264, if you're not doing a really fast edit, I've got some DJI footage, some GoPro, I'm just going to edit this thing and get in and get out. If I'm working on something that's going to take me, a couple of months to do, I would just tell you flat out, convert all your files to ProRes or to some other format. ProRes is a simple one on both platforms. All your MP4s, there's pretty easy ways to set up AME to automatically do that for you, just with a watched folder. But peak files on a server, generally not a good idea. Open Drives and SNS have done a fairly decent job. Where we have found issues with cache files, a lot of people don't think that these things actually have system clocks on them. The clock in the project and the clock on the server don't line up, so it just keeps generating peak files all the time. So you can really get into a rat's nest trying to do that. So we always just recommend local NVMe. Get a second one if you need one. By the way, for people that just like to know what all these files are, Mitch, I can't remember who created this list, but there's a lot of them. The only ones you really need to pay attention to are conformed audio files and the peak files for waveform files.
Oh,
so
and IMS, definitely need to pay attention to IMS.
Well, and IMS, right? Top three. So, but there's a bunch of other ones if you're just curious what some of these files are that Premiere makes on the fly and end out there. So performance and memory, this is a really important one because, again, I think we need to make it easier. We should automate this for you. On this Mac that I'm using here, my laptop, it's got 64 gigs of RAM in it. Premiere just says, oh, well, why don't we just save 6 gigs of RAM for other applications? And we have this rule, and Mitch and I have worked on this for years. We have what's called the 70-30 rule when you have less than 32 gigs of RAM, and an 80-20 rule when you have more than 32 gigs of RAM, just because you're wasting resources that way. And what this is referring to is, it says other applications. Keep in mind your operating system is another application that's constantly got things going on. And when you screw around with this RAM and not really setting it the right way, 9 times out of 10, you're starving the operating system and things like Chrome, which want lots of resources, and you're trying to figure out how come after 2 hours everything goes wonky. It's because you got all these things going on your system. So this is a really, really good rule of thumb. 64 gigs of RAM, change this button to 12. Again, we're trying to get some of this automated for you because it seems like simple math to me. You will also notice that when you have systems that have 196 gigs of RAM or whatever, Premiere is going to take all of that up to whatever is reserved. And people get nervous about that. Premiere will give it back to AE or any of these other apps that need it. Premiere just figures out, just like After Effects does, if nobody's using it and it makes things faster, I'm going to take it. So that's basically what's happening there. And then you'll start to see these other apps, if you've never looked at this, if they're open, they'll light up and they'll kind of just have a little buffet going on there and start sharing some of the RAM. So it works really well. The other button that we see a lot of times is performance. You'll see the little definition at the bottom. You want to set to memory when you have a large number of high resolution video or still images. What it basically just helps you avoid these low memory warnings that can pop up there. So,
yeah, so I will jump in here as well.
Yeah,
now that preference really came into effect back in the Windows 98 days when 8 gigs of RAM was a lot and you had to go out and pay 100 gigs or $100 a gig for the stuff. That's really not nearly as important anymore when every system has 8, 16, 24, 32, 365 gigs of RAM. So for the most part, you can just always leave it set at performance and just walk away.
Yeah.
Andy has a pretty good question relevant to all this is, do you need to restart Premiere when you are changing these settings for them to take effect, or can you just change them here and then they're good?
Yeah.
For memory, absolutely not. There are other preferences, though, that you will need to restart Premiere. But for example, what do I do on startup? So, yeah, that's not going to make any change until you actually restart Premiere. But yeah, they are for the most part instantaneous as soon as you make the preference change.
And other things I just try to get people to think about on video. What are some of the other bottlenecks that are out there? A lot of time it's your codecs. You really got to think about what is this, and this also includes firmware updates on camera. Canon's notorious for this, and we have definitely done our best to keep up with Canon. I know we just made a big change. It's that Canon. What was the model camera that we just updated this week, Mitch? That has
oh gosh, put me on the spot.
It's new optimized support that is, but where some of the Canon files were really starting to lag because there was a firmware change and there were some other changes, but all that's been addressed. So always remember, hey, this was working. Did anything change on the cameras? And Red's another one, although the Red stuff usually keeps up pretty good with their firmware changes, and they actually get us back the SDK stuff that we need fairly quick. So these are just some things that I like to point out. A lot of you may not be using some of these long GOP formats, for example. Not a very good format for documentary kind of work, just for everything that it has to draw and create on the fly with these 3 different types of frames that it has to create. So again, I would tell a lot of people, you may be better off converting that to ProRes or to DNX. Now, that brings us to a really good point. Back in the Final Cut days, right, early on, Final Cut 7 days, they pretty much said the only thing we really want, and even Final Cut 10 for that matter, just give us ProRes. I mean, yeah, it can do some native stuff, but that's an optimized format. So you either pay your tax to convert that in the beginning, or you're going to pay it on the rendering, or you're going to suffer on the timeline. Sometimes, like I said, if it's a quick edit and you just want to slap it on a timeline and do whatever it is you want to do, and not a lot of noodling around with it for months on end, then native files are great. And it is always cool that Premiere, we really work hard on that to make sure you can slap pretty much anything on the timeline and have it work. It doesn't mean that would be the best environment for that project. And again, Avid sort of does the same thing with DNX. So again, it just depends on how much time are you going to spend in the project. So smart rendering, if you guys weren't aware, is a really cool thing. I'll have Mitch jump into here and talk about it because this is a busy slide. But while we'll get Mitch to describe you what smart rendering is, because it's a feature that can just save you a ton of time if you know how to use it the right way, where we copy chunks of data. But the busyness over here will kind of tell you which codecs we support, certainly in a QuickTime wrapper and an MXF wrapper. You want to chime in, Mitch? Because this is something we use all the time.
So one of the things is that if you're rendering to QuickTime, smart rendering is on all the time. It's on by default. If you're exporting to MXF OP1A, there's actually a checkbox in the export settings that you have to enable to be able to get smart rendering. So what smart rendering is that we look at the media that you are working with in the timeline, and we look at the format that you're exporting out to. So if those 2 things match, we go, why do we need to render it? We don't. We'll just take that chunk of frames and we will put it over here, and it'll be part of your export. Now, if we get to a transition or an effect or something, a different format that we do need to render, we'll render that section out and can make a ProRes file or an MXF OP1A file out of it. And then we'll get to another section that doesn't need to be rendered because it matches, and we'll just copy that in whole on the output. So when you take those big chunks and actually copy them rather than render them, it speeds things up dramatically. I mean, it can cut your time way
basically just copying chunks
exactly
as fast as your NVMe can handle it. Sometimes it's literally just seconds to get a video done. It's pretty crazy how well it works. Anyway, it's one to point out on a performance tune that just does, and it's really one of the only times I ever like to see a timeline green is when you've done effects and you've done things and you're like, well, I'm going to use my previews and I'm going to render these things out. There are a lot of cases, Mitch, you might mention one where smart rendering kind of gets doesn't work, or it defaults back to a render anyway because something doesn't line up. Right?
Well, so smart rendering and using the preview files are very similar, but they're still a little bit different.
They are,
right?
Yeah.
So smart rendering, it actually just looks at the source media, whereas using the preview files, there's a little, you probably have noticed in the export settings, there's an option to use previews. So the way that works is, again, if the preview file format matches your export format exactly, we don't see any reason to re-render those files for you. So we'll just take those preview files and copy them over in whole to your export. Now, again, if there's any change, is there a frame rate size change, a pixel aspect change, a codec change, audio channel change, any of that stuff, we'll just go, yeah, sorry, we can't use those preview files, and we'll re-render. We won't warn you, but we'll just go ahead and do it anyway.
Yeah, think of the used preview files as kind of the smart rendering for anything that you've rendered, right? Just use the pre-rendered file on export and just copy that as a chunk directly over, because they kind of work hand in hand. So just to kind of point that out. And one of the things, so this is a really
quick, hey Dave, real quick,
please.
Nate had a question about preview files, and so Nate, do you want to just pop on? Can you ask?
Nate, sure.
Can you answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, I was just wondering what the difference is with using the video previews, like exporting in your timeline versus doing an export with the export dialog. So I've had projects where I couldn't get a successful export using the export dialog, but I could render in timeline perfectly fine. And so I ended up doing this workflow where I rendered out the entire project in the timeline and then exported using previews, and then I could get a final output.
So there are a lot of reasons why that could work. So when you're actually rendering your preview files, what we're doing is we're actually taking a look at trying to render those things out in smaller chunks. And that chunk size depends a lot on how the timeline is laid out. When we're trying to do an export, we may be doing GPU acceleration on an H.264, trying to do a hardware encode and trying to push it through that way. And that can change that rendering pipeline quite a bit. If you go ahead and render your entire timeline out as a preview file, essentially what we're looking at is one single flattened file. And then when you export that out, that is much easier to go ahead and do an export or do your encode to then 1,500 individual little segments. That make sense? That help?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. But
one of the things we've definitely seen when all else fails, which it did in your case, right? Except having to render and turn everything green. That's a great time to clear the cache the way we told you, with closing everything out, close the projects, and also hold down Alt-Shift, click on the app, and just reset Premiere. Because I have seen when things get out of a little wonky. The other thing is believe it or not, sometimes we've seen where Premiere and AME can get out of sync, like you're running a different version of AME. Pretty much only happens on like an enterprise install where somebody's controlling what gets installed in your system. But we've also seen that kind of fail. It keeps things from being sent to A, which is another question, I guess. Could you hit Q and go to AME?
I could try to send it to AME, but the export would fail.
It would still fail.
Well.
Yeah, that's telling me it's your preference file.
I mean, during this ended with a lot of projects or a lot of timelines on this project, but during this process, while I was doing all these edits, I actually built an entirely new computer, and I still had the exact same things. So that was a fresh install of literally everything, brand new hardware, and I still
that's interesting.
had difficulty getting exports. I mean, it was a complicated timeline. There was a lot going in there. I mean, a lot of these timelines were 5 to 10 minutes long.
Any idea if you cleared the preferences out? I mean, the cache out the same way? Because if you had stale cache, if you copied all of that project over, the cache would come over with it.
That's a good question. I mean, I feel like I did at some point. I remember doing a lot of different troubleshooting. I feel like I did that. That was actually when I found out about NVIDIA Studio drivers, and so that's I replaced versus the game drivers. So I replaced it with that, and that seems to help a little bit. But.
A great place for help is the Moving to Premiere Pro Facebook page. because all of us on our team monitor that where we can. We try not to chime in too much because we just like user to user interaction. We kind of chime in when we think we need to. So if you don't, I'm gonna, if you do use Facebook, if not, make up an account if you don't want to put your personal data, because it is a great place for Adobe support on certainly Premiere and After Effects. So moving to Premiere Pro is monitored by us. We will chime in there. And the other thing is, which I guess, Mitch, we should talk about, Premiere crashes and it comes up with a dialog box that says, hey, tell us what went on. After you finish, all the 4-letter words that you just need to get out, which by the way is fine. Put your name and phone number on there, because we will 9 times out of 10 call you back.
I will say you guys got a lot of those from me, but I did not get it.
No, absolutely. Just, again, put your email. I mean, those things go directly to engineering, and there's someone that scrapes those. And if it is something that you would say, I would really love a call back, someone will 9 times out of 10 call you back. Absolutely. Because we are trying to figure out in those instances what's going on. I mean, it's a pretty complex program. There's just a ton of stuff going on, but yeah. And I guess, by the way, see what happens, reach out to Eric if you're still having issues, and maybe Mitch and I'll circle back around with you. Maybe do a screen share and figure that one out for you.
Cool. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome. And then I do spend time on this one here because, again, you're exporting. Again, here's like an H.264. People want to render at maximum depth. That sounds like a great thing. Well, you only kind of hit that button there's actually 2 examples of this where if you are paid hourly, it's probably a good idea to hit that button because it's going to do a deeper scan. The other one, which I guess I don't have on this page. Oh, I do. Use maximum render quality is use maximum time. Like take a lot of time. Time's not important to me, because if you click that button, it is going to waste time. Because 9 times out of 10, you only need that button if you're doing a lot of scaling up and down. Like, I wish we didn't even have that button available, because people are like, yep, I want best quality, lots of color, go at it. Why is Premiere so slow? One of the problems with that I think we have is we give you a button for everything. And a lot of these other apps, they hide those buttons and you can't get to them, and they just appear to be faster. And then our engineers will say, well, this is a better quality. If you look at it under a microscope or whatever, it's better quality. And where Mitch and I are often going back and saying, customers don't care. They just want it to look good and be fast. So these buttons here, I'm just telling you, keep those off. And if it's HDR, a lot of times this match sorts button will take care of that for you. This is the one that gets you in trouble all the time. Don't touch it. Also, don't do, you get a choice for single pass or double pass, 1 pass, 2 pass. Don't click 2 pass anymore. It's not necessary. The video, again, unless you're paid hourly. The codecs today are really, really clean on H.264. Anything else to add to that screen, Mitch?
Not that I can think of. No.
I guess hardware encoding will turn on and turn off in some cases. You'll get infuriated by that too, because if you have a certain GPU and you're trying to read an 8K file and you don't have enough VRAM on the GPU, that's going to default to software encoding because you don't have enough memory to handle it. So, some timelines you might get that, another timeline you won't. It's all about system resources on that, because I do find that confusing.
Well, there's some other things that can trip you up on that too. Yeah. For example, if you're trying to export out a file, an H.264 file with just video but no audio, as soon as you uncheck the export audio button, we switch over to software encoding because we're trying to do the muxing on the GPU. So as soon as you ask us to make an unusual MPEG-4 file, we go, no, we better back off and do this the slow way.
Yeah, it's definitely getting better. And by the way, hardware encoding on the new NVIDIA, AMD, and Metal is really fast. And you got to be running, certainly 14.9, some of the upper versions of 14 and of course 15. Online performance benchmarks. You guys probably are smart on this too. Just question everything. Just like, come on, what's really going on here? Because everybody has a story. I do a lot of these benchmarks here, and I try to tell the truth all the time, but it is so easy to manipulate it, to slam resources. And a lot of people will create an edit that looks like garbage and would never be a video anybody creates. It's like a nerd demo. A lot of stuff that I spend my time on are actual timelines that says, hey, I'm trying to do a multicam. We're trying to do this. We want to get some lumetry. This is like a real edit, not like a nerd demo. When I did this one, and there's a YouTube video up that started to show about new resources that were there and some work that we had done. And this was using an external GPU via Thunderbolt. You can see that we're pegging resources. We've got 3 GPUs kind of hitting this, and it really is fast. And that was a pretty good edit there with some Gaussian blur and some effects going on. But again, look at what I was doing here. I was doing ProRes to ProRes, right? And then I did a ProRes to H.264. This is when we kind of kick in and we're using additional hardware to spike that. So you always have to question what effects. Are those effects GPU? Are they heavy GPU? Are they light GPU? Are they optimized? Because it really does make a difference. I will say that a lot of us, and certainly in the engineering team, really like the guys out at Puget Systems, because their benchmarks are fantastic. Whether or not you have one of their systems or not, you can go up and download the free version and benchmark your hardware. There is a pay version that takes you to the next level for both Premiere and After Effects. It's pretty cool. So, any questions on that? And obviously look at the export frame rate. We actually can rip apart a lot of performance videos that we see online all the time when they're showing you the right things. Because again, a lot of them are try to create their narrative by the vendor that's sponsoring their hardware or whatever they got for free. So keep that in mind too. Okay, a couple things on After Effects. And I'm happy to show you guys what multi-frame rendering looks like if you're curious, or if we have time, Eric, we can open it up a bit more. The 18 beta is available right now for Premiere Pro and for After Effects. The new Premiere beta is out. These betas come out typically on Tuesdays. We are going to be reducing the amount, we hope, right, Mitch? Reducing the amount of updates that we're going to release for Premiere and After Effects. Hopefully they're not going to be monthly anymore. We're trying to get to a longer cadence. We're just as annoyed with that as you guys are. It's too many updates, and they're not real big changes. But the betas, you can update those however you want. You can run the beta and the shipping app on the same system, no problem. So you're pretty much good to go on that. So if you want to experience multi-frame rendering on your systems and you're big into After Effects, then have at it, check it out. Multi-frame rendering is going to have a lot of cool effects. It's going to be able to performance enhancements. It's going to change how motion graphics templates behave inside Premiere, because you're going to get the benefit of multi-frame rendering for motion graphics templates with what we call headless Premiere. And then also you're going to get a lot of benefit through dynamic link coming out with multi-frame rendering. So hopefully we'll be shipping that out soon. But just wanted you guys to know that this goes back to the first set of slides, which are to the version that ships today for After Effects. Basically single threaded, all it cares about is clock speed. In the future, very soon, and currently in the beta, clock speed and cores fast as you can. So up to about 32 is probably pretty good, and then faster clock. So spend your money on Core i9s or Ryzen's are fine with high clocks and threads. So I hope that makes a difference. VRAM, as I said, use a lot of VRAM where needed. After Effects loves memory, And NVMe is no exception on for cache files. After Effects creates lots of tiny cache files as well. So we have found that NVMe really helps a lot with After Effects and any of the global cache stuff that goes out. So After Effects, again, on the RAM side, plus NVMe. And again, as I say here, it's getting cheaper all the time. So pretty much number one rule, read speed for drives is important again. SSDs work. These SATA ones work fine. These are going to be way better. If you didn't know this, you can get an add-in card and pop it in their PCI add-in card. They're pretty cheap. They're about $25. You know, again, if you like to build your own system, you can get them for as little as $25 that support booting. And there's either one or two NVMe slots on there. Most of the newer motherboards have them built in on the motherboard. On the Mac side, it's all soldered on the motherboard, so it's basically as fast as you're going to get. So with After Effects, you always have to ask yourself the plugin question, which is, are they really up to date, or are you just trying to save some money and not update them? Because when you're trying to go with multi-rendering, like I'm talking about in the new version of After Effects, all the plugins have to be updated to support multi-threading. Things like Red Giant, Boris, a lot of those are GPU enabled. So they're already going to be optimized for GPU. Those things will work fine. All of those companies in Cinema 4D, which also owns Red Giant, they're fast at work and getting all that ready for multi-frame rendering within After Effects. But I just want you to know that when you're looking at performance inside of After Effects, make sure that those plugins are as up to date as they need to be. And then this is really just back to what we had talked about in Premiere. It's the same RAM rule for After Effects. You see I'm running After Effects 64 gigs. We changed this from 6 to 12. So again, less than 32, just to restate that, the 70-30 plan, and then 80-20 plan when you're over 64 gigs of RAM. And of course, After Effects usually recommends that you close your browser down too, because it will take extra resources. A lot of Microsoft apps will do that. Sometimes you can't, but if you're just trying to speed things up. And then for that, it's pretty cool. And then there's some additional resources here. I did put in the benchmarks for Puget systems. By the way, a lot of my the competitors to Puget, I've actually seen them running these benchmarks too. They're that good. A lot of people will run these benchmarks. So I hope that helps. By the way, a great YouTube channel I'll just call out is Colin Smith's Video Revealed. He worked for me for 10 years. He's now retired. One of the best resources on YouTube right now. He just released an entire Premiere Pro 101 training class for free. Just released that last week. So would tell you to definitely go check that out. And then of course, Dave Tech Table will always kind of tell you what's new. So Eric, we can do a couple things. We can show some things in Premiere or some multi-rendering, depending on the time that we've got left. I'm fine on time, so you let me know. Or we can try to answer some more questions. You tell me.
Yeah, let's do some Q&A, just because I think there are folks that have some questions. So let me.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's oftentimes on my timeline now, I'm starting to experience Premiere Pro going rogue in that screen will pop up and ask me if I want to save the project, and I'm in the middle of an edit. And if I click no, it closes the program. If I click yes, it saves the project and closes anyway. Any idea why that might be happening?
You want to tell us a little bit about your system, and who was asking the question? I didn't see you come up on the.
I'm sorry, it's Bill.
Oh, hey, Bill. So if you want to tell us a little bit of, is it a Windows? Is it Mac? What?
Yeah, it's a Windows system. And this is just something that just started happening. So I don't know. I'm ready to upgrade the system. As a matter of fact, just ordered one today, but maybe that's the issue. Mine's 5 years old.
No. Premiere shouldn't do that. Mitch, you want to chime in with any thoughts?
The only reason I can think that it would do that is that it thinks you're signed out. So it's like the application is trying to quit, and it's going, "Hey, do you want to save this project before we pull the rug out from underneath you?" Check to see that you are signed in Premiere, and also check to see in the Creative Cloud desktop app if you're signed in there. I have seen the Creative Cloud desktop app get out of sync, be an older version and not get updated, and they're supposed to both be signed in at the same time. It's not supposed to be possible for you to be signed out of one and not signed out of the other, but I still have seen it happen.
Hey, Mitch, you want to mention OneDrive that happened to Jeff the other day that took us a while to figure what the heck was going on there?
Oh, that was lovely. So now, see, you don't want to go borrowing trouble, Dave. I don't know that we want to bring
it's
that
good.
up.
It's good for these guys to know that with these apps, there can be trouble.
Absolutely. All right, fair enough. So we ran into a problem with Microsoft OneDrive the other day. OneDrive has this lovely little feature of synchronizing all your files on your computer. If you let it, and one of the things it will do is it will sync your My Documents folder. So essentially what was happening is the My Documents folder got rerouted on this user's computer to OneDrive, which is on the server. And so when Premiere would launch, it would reach out to OneDrive to try to read from the preferences and write to the preferences. And then when we close, we try to reach out to OneDrive to read from the preferences and write to the preferences. And depending on his connection availability, that would either work or not work.
And Premiere would either work or not work. I mean, it was really tough. And there were a lot of things that get written to that document folder. I can't remember if Warp Stabilizer, not Warp Stabilizer, one of the other ones gets written. I guess Warp Stabilizer gets written with the project.
That gets written to the project.
Yeah, but some of the other ones where there's resources where it goes, things just start to go crazy. So the documents folder, the reason we mention this, you see it's there, but it's not really there. It's really up in the cloud. The documents folder becomes a place to sync. And when it doesn't have OneDrive connected, the documents folder doesn't work correctly. So a complete nightmare. So these are some of the things that we are running into. By the way, I did see, I'm just scanning over the questions here. Definitely we're doing a ton of work on the stabilization side. So when you guys call that out, so the Warp Stabilizer, we've done a ton of new work. I want to say we did some work with Devin Supertramp on that, didn't we, Mitch? When he was testing some of that out, that there's a whole new algorithm now. So you might try running that again. It's not only faster, but it's all new math on how that happens. So I hope that it's better on that. So just want you guys to check that out. Just again, the math on these things changes all the time. So it's a matter of us just keeping up with that. So thanks for calling that out. Any other questions, Eric?
Michael Jones, do you want to ask your question? I see you've got your hand up.
I think this may be a continuation of the same type of issue. I'm on a Mac, and when I do a save as, many times Premiere will crash. And when I reopen it, the project is there, but the timeline, instead of being all the separate shots and separate elements, is just one long green line. The only way I can get around that is to save a copy and it won't crash. But also, if it does crash, if I take that sequence and open it, use the what am I asking? Open in timeline, which is the choice, then those will come back. Here's the problem, is that has moved from update to update. In other words, it's not something that just happened in a single version of Premiere, but it's walked forward as I have updated.
So I wonder if that's pref related again, Mitch. You might again always go to ground zero with those two tricks. Just while you're troubleshooting, we used to have a script, and actually we still pass it around when needed. It's actually written for CS5 that goes out and wipes everything out with one button. It's kind of the nuclear option. and we have it for Mac and Windows. And again, we've tried to make this a little bit easier. But the first thing I would tell you to do, Michael, is try to get everything reset to ground zero, because like you said, you've walked this thing up. Things can get fragile. I'll tell you, on Mac and on Windows, I never update from like one major operating system to the next. I format it, I wipe it out, and I start over. That rarely works when you can go from an older architecture, especially on Mac. Now that Big Sur's out, trying to get that upgraded, it does work, it does come over, but at some point in time, you're going to end up formatting your hard drive and starting over. Absolutely a fact for Windows too. There's too much legacy and garbage that is just there to slow things down. So keep that in mind. And again, preference files can get munged too. And again, we are looking at sort of building in a nuclear option on some of our apps where you can hold some keys down, click a button and say, you sure you want to do this? And probably ask you 3 times before we wipe everything out, which is basically going to be prefs, cache, whatever. But I still think you need like a single point to get in there to do that. I mean, Mitch, anything you can think of?
Well, so the whole sequence opening up as a solid green line instead of individual clips, that sounds to me like you tried to drag a sequence into another sequence,
like a nest,
and had the little let's see, what is the darn thing called? There's a tool in the sequence called insert or overwrite sequences as nests or individual clips. If you have it in one position, it brings it in as a solid nest and it looks like a green clip. Otherwise, it brings it in as individual sequences if you have it toggled the other direction. So,
is there any thoughts on why it would crash the program when I do a save as?
It depends on where you're saving it. That'd be my first thing is check to see where you're saving it and save it to someplace generally safe, like your desktop, where you know that you have full access and read write permission. So check to see if it works fine there, and then start experimenting about where else you can save it.
Yeah, I think on the Mac, there's less read write headaches usually, unless it's on a different volume somewhere where you could run into that. I will say that all these new operating systems are trying to keep you from hurting yourself, right, or have someone else from hurting you. So there's certainly a lot of locks on these things. But yeah, Michael, I mean, it definitely sounds like I said, either a munged preference, and maybe Mitch is right. I mean, maybe there's something going on access.
Yeah, I do save everything, the whole program. In other words, all the footage and everything else to an outboard SSD. And so what you're saying now is maybe try and create the thing on the drive, the startup drive, and then when it's all done, then move it someplace else.
Yeah,
I would check with that.
Is it USB 3 by chance?
It is, yes, it's going through USB 3.1 actually.
Okay, so 3.1 is better, as I said. So yeah, if you could save the file to your internal NVMe and just see what's going on. Again, depending on the type of drive and the controller chip, sometimes these things take a second to spin up or whatever, and SSDs can get hot. Especially if you've kind of built it yourself. And I certainly build a lot of my own drives, but a lot of times, they don't have the right kind of cooling. Weird things can happen on that. But again, it definitely sounds like something else happening there.
I've been working with these nonlinear editors since they started, and I back up every 2 minutes. Oh. And, an auto save, because I'm so used to Avid crashing and Final Cut. The old versions of Final Cut would crash and you'd lose everything.
I think, crashing is part of the territory, and it shouldn't be that way. In my opinion.
What's your hardware, Michael?
I have an iMac that I work on, 2016.
Okay.
Because
if you're on a long documentary and you've got your save as, too short, you're writing a lot of stuff, and it's trying to save if it's too short. Sometimes I've seen that where it crashes on the save when it's trying to do the auto save. So maybe it's too short.
Well, it doesn't crash with an autosave. It makes the autosaves just fine. It's just when I do a Shift Command S to save the whole thing. I work on just short stuff. I don't work on anything that's very long at all. So 3 to 5 minutes is going to be the max of what I do.
Yeah.
So the chances are those autosaves are going to an internal drive and writing just fine. And it's when you're writing to that external drive that you're having the problem. So I check that.
Well, actually, no. I send everything to that. When I do the setup of the project, I send everything to the outboard drive, and that may be the mistake. So that I'll try a version of sending it to the startup drive and then see if the problem, I can duplicate the problem, and if I can't duplicate it, then that's obviously the answer. So that I can change my workflow to work to the startup drive, and when I'm all done, just take that folder and move it someplace else to archive it.
I'm gonna keep the questions moving along here, so hopefully that helps you, Michael. Kyle had a question a while back. Are there any recommendations to speed up sequences like PNG or TIFF sequences when editing for maintaining lossless compression? So I guess basically, Kyle, if I got your question wrong, I think you're still on here, you can chime in, but I think it's basically if you're dealing with image sequences, how to speed things up.
Mitch, you want to take PNGs? Because I think that's certainly a popular question.
So are you talking about Premiere or are you talking about After Effects? I'm assuming you're talking about Premiere. So to speed them up, probably not. Our image handling, is still not GPU accelerated. So we spent most of our time focusing on video formats and not still image formats. So it does require more CPU than it would just playing back a regular video file. So probably not a whole heck of a lot you can do there. 8-bit are definitely going to work better than 10-bit. They're going to be easier to handle. Files without alpha channel are going to be easier than files with alpha channel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you need to work with what you need to work with. So
are you animating photos? What's the workflow? Because I mean, those will typically work, but Mitch is right. There are times when they can get a little stuttery and slow. But I mean, they should render. What's the problem? Describe the project a little bit.
Kyle, if you're online, you can go ahead and talk. I think I still see him here, although maybe he stepped away.
Kyle, you might be on mute, possibly.
You should.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah. Okay. So anytime when I'm doing a lot of animation sequences, I usually like to render them out in PNG because it preserves the color bit def on them. There's an older piece of software that I use that has an issue with its codec problem, so I can't render directly to like an MP4 kind of format or something like that. And QuickTime is obviously completely outdated now. So what I usually like to do is I like to render in PNG sequences just because, again, it preserves the color depth and it just maintains that high quality. And I import that straight into either my video editor or something like that, and I just see if I can start working with that. But of course, the problem that I've always ran into is that it's just super slow, and I figured that I just might have asked the question because I'm pretty sure Premiere doesn't really handle these, but I just wanted to be sure if that's the case.
I mean, it'll definitely do it. One thing you could certainly do is to try to, if the animation's done, just render that out as a ProRes file and maintain the color. If you need the bit depth, just choose the right codec. Where are they coming from? What's the program?
So some of them sometimes come from Blender. Another one that I like to use, and one that I use now is the Source 2 engine.
Okay, because you can certainly bring those into After Effects as well, because it handles those beautifully. Okay. And then just tell After Effects to I guess you could dynamic link it if you wanted to, but you could also just tell After Effects to render that out as a ProRes at the right bit depth.
Okay.
So
one question I had, NVIDIA cards, Quadro, GeForce, does it make a difference?
It does when you go to write a check for it.
I was just going to say, just share of wallet. And I have them all here. I mean, I just got the A6000s and some of the other ones that came in. I mean, there are differences. One of the biggest ones is obviously warranty. If you're in a studio environment, there's swap outs and all that stuff. But when it comes to performance, it's negligible. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but they dropped the Quadro name. It's no longer called Quadro. It's just RTX. There is GeForce and there's just RTX because they are very similar. I will find that, you know, GeForce I like a little bit better because I like having an HDMI port when I need one and not have to use an adapter. Quadros, for whatever reasons, don't have an HDMI port. So the Quadros definitely did. I have to double check on the RTX or the A series, but AMD is getting better. I've always been a fan of the AMD hardware, and I was a beta tester for about 8 months on the Navi 21 stuff that was out. So I was one of the guys that were doing a lot of testing on that. Great hardware. The only thing that makes me nervous on some of the AMD stuff and just to be aware of is driver inconsistency from one release to the next. So it's great hardware. If you've got it, it works fantastic. You know, we do optimize for that. Be very leery of changing your driver unless you're flagged by us. NVIDIA is usually pretty good because you can roll back. So I do get a lot of questions on is one better than the other. We do optimize a lot for H.265 and H.264 and between all three of the platforms, again, AMD, NVIDIA, and Metal, and they should all be pretty neck and neck. So,
Eric, just get whatever you can get because you can't get them anywhere.
Now, I know I have a lot of them here in my lab. Like I'm saying, I feel like, wow, I could, you know, if I was the wrong person, I could probably go out and put some bit mining on there.
Yeah.
Well,
it's crazy what's going on now.
I have a question for you. Is it time for those of us that are stuck with old Mac Pro cylinder trash cans to move up to something different this year? Will Premiere's code change that much that it'll be a sore spot for those of us stuck on old hardware?
Yeah, I'll tell you the new M series Macs are amazingly fast. Certainly for what they are. And by the way, I'm absolutely going to be confident that when the Windows ARM stuff and all that comes out there, there's a lot of the code is getting just back to I think it was Kyle's P&G question. For Mac M1, Mitch, it would be interesting to see because we had to rewrite those importers anyway. We may have actually, you know, done some optimizations on some of the M1 stuff for Mac, which Premiere, by the way, will be out for the Mac users as soon as we can get it out. The delay right now is dynamic link inside of After Effects because After Effects is everything is about multi-rendering. Get that out as soon as that's done. M1 is next. They're already doing M1 work. I mean, M1 will go into beta pretty soon for After Effects. It's pretty fast now, even just running under emulation. But do you guys know how to tell if an app is running on Apple Silicon or Intel when it's on an M1? And then again, I think this is gonna play to that. I can show you if you're curious.
Is it in the activity monitor?
No, it's and this is just a Mac Mini, but if you pull the side over here, if you just go find an app, you go to Premiere and you just do a get info on Premiere, it will say what the application's running here, and the app may say Apple Silicon, but you know, right now what we've done with our apps is our apps are now universal. So one app will go Intel or it'll go the other way. If you open up an app that is not, I see Video QC, it will tell you that it's Intel. See here. So that's how you know whether or not it's ready for M1 or that platform. Again, some applications, if they're not universal, will just say Apple Silicon. We have updated, I think, Mitch, we've updated all of our apps. So if you go to like After Effects here, I think After Effects will probably say Intel. See, it says Intel here.
Yeah.
And that's the last one, by the way. Audition just shipped. So Audition, the commercial version is ready to go, and it is fast. So
yeah, so Premiere does run under Rosetta 2 right now. You can just launch it, and it works great. In fact, it works surprisingly well.
After Effects does too. After Effects is actually faster under emulation with given the same things than it is on a regular Intel. I don't know why, because it shouldn't be.
Yeah,
but it is.
We were doing some pretty impressive things on just a little MacBook Air. We're doing 4K video and not dropping frames, and it's just like, what is going on here? It is very impressive. So yes, you are going to want to update your hardware. You won't want to buy one of those $50,000 Mac Pros that they're hawking, but the new M1 Macs are pretty sexy looking.
I am nervous about the 16 gigs of RAM, and certainly 8 we already talked about.
Keep I was too initially, but like I said, the performance has just been outstanding. They are much better use of RAM on the Mac ARM series.
Apple definitely had the most impressive launch of any hardware in the past 15 years, to how well they executed that. And I do think that for those of you running Windows, or like myself, run both, it's just a whole new era of computing, because when Windows ARM and everything else gets out, everything has to get re-optimized. We are rewriting, starting with M1, and we're also doing the Windows ARM work too, just so you know, it's all parallel. We are re-optimizing libraries to make them run tiny, as small as we can. So I don't know whether or not 16 is going to be the new 32. It's too early.
I kind of think it will be.
I know.
I think Windows
but GPUs are going to change too, right? So all of this stuff is going to change, and it's one of the beautiful things about Windows is you can kind of limp along the pieces that you need if you build your own systems, right? Which is kind of nice. And even some of the Mac Pro, the cheese graters, some of the early ones, you could kind of upgrade those and go. These newer systems, as you guys know, you're locked in. Everything's soldered on there. You can't do anything. It's like an iPad. You buy it, it's planned obsolescence for sure. So depending on what type of system you run, but also they're kind of priced reasonable, I think, for what you get. So I think it's an exciting time.
I'm ordering one, so it'll be here in June. So
have you picked a color yet? Because I think that's hilarious. Now you got to worry about, does my keyboard, do I want to match the keyboard? Do I want to go pink and baby blue? Did they go together?
No, I ordered a Mac Mini. I'm like, I've got monitor.
Yeah, well, that's actually what I'm running here is a Mac Mini. It works great. Any other questions, Eric?
Does anybody else have any other questions here? I know there was go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's cool. I actually have a lot of questions, but
sure. Let's start with one.
If there's other people, we'll start with one. Mostly they're just about getting hardware that's going to be as reliable as possible. Is there a specific set of gear of equipment, a specific like a CPU or a GPU that you found tends to be more reliable and be more successful exports?
Again, I'm typically the hardware guy here. That and Mitch will tell you, my office looks like a Best Buy store sometimes with all the equipment coming and going. But I find that Core i9s are fantastic. I mean, they're a really, really good value. I think the Ryzen processors, the Threadripper stuff is impressive, way more impressive than I ever thought it would be. I mean, it is pretty amazing. I think it's not so much reliable, Nate, as I think it is, where are you wasting your money? Let's just say you have a budget. You're like, I'm going to spend $3,000 or $5,000, whatever the number is. Mm-hmm. What we try to do is just help you spend it the right way. If you go heavy in any one place, and again, I'll throw it out to the government. I see some of these systems that the government orders. They just order 2 A6000s, and they order 2 platinum processors, and they end up with a $40,000 workstation that any laptop with a decent T80i in there, or a T2080 Ti, it would absolutely flatten it out. But so a Core i9 is good if you're on a little bit of a lighter weight budget. Core i7 is good. And you're going to build it yourself or order one that's pre-built?
Well, I mean, I work on a team, so we're always needing new computers and stuff. So like right now I'm on Ryzen. I have a 3900 XT, but we'll need more computers soon. So like, do you generally feel like Intel's going to be a little bit more reliable than AMD? I mean, you're mentioning like NVIDIA seems to be a little more reliable on the GPU side. Than
the only thing on NVIDIA is that, like I say, that I am a fan of the just the way drivers work. In general, the drivers are good. They can go wonky. The main driver that goes crazy, by the way, is the Intel, things like the 630 drivers, and those are mainly on laptops, can get you in trouble on Windows sometimes in the system compatibility report. And also, Mitch, Realtek drivers keep you up quite a bit too for some of the audio stuff.
Not like they used to, but
Not
yeah,
like
they still do.
But yeah, I mean, Core i7 in any of the new generations, it's not a matter of reliability. It's really just a matter of function. If you can put a Core i9, that's good, or a Ryzen. I don't think you need to go any higher than 3060, 3070. Again, I guess when graphics cards become available again. But you have to keep in mind that NVIDIA discontinues graphics cards all the time now. K series, I think, Mitch, now are discontinued.
K series are gone.
N
Yeah.
series, which means P series, is the Pascal cards are going to be in jeopardy soon. So the one thing I do like about GeForce cards, I'll throw it out there, is if you are someone that likes to build your own system on the Windows side, you can eBay those things pretty quick. And if you just get in the habit of flipping those cards every year and a half or whatever, and take a little bit of the hit, those cards still kind of hold their value because the gamers want them. There's kids building systems. I was looking for someone the other day. I saw 1080s going for $850, an old 1080 card. It's like they still hold their value. I mean, it's a little high right now because of just what's going on. So, I mean, Nate, that might be something to think about too. And that way, one of the things I do like about when you have a Windows system that you customize, like I said, it's really the graphics cards and the drives that you'll swap out. So
Gotcha.
I can't talk enough about NVMe.
Okay.
Make sure it's built in on the motherboard. All the new systems, even HPs and Dells, and all the new motherboards have NVMe. And like I said, I mean, it's funny because I have a stack of them here, like on my desk. Like there's just tons of them here because I'm constantly loading something on a system. And if I have it here, I have an NVMe duplicator. The thing's small. Oh, here it is, an NVMe duplicator. You just put two of the sticks in there, push a button, and it just goes boom, and it just copies it over in about 5 minutes. So when I get a laptop that I'm testing, I'll typically, put that in here, put a blank over here, click the button, and it clones it, right? And then I can screw this up before I send Mitch, a laptop or something that I've got all my crap on it. So it's so easy right now to do that, and it's fast. I mean, it literally takes like 5 minutes to back up a 1 terabyte drive and to do a bit copy. So, I mean, I think that would be my suggestion, Nate. And the other thing is, as I said, I'm a huge believer in Thunderbolt when it comes to video editing, because you just need to back things up on Mac and Windows. And if you obviously exFAT that, then you can share it with other people. So
yeah, I've got an NVMe as my boot drive, but not for my storage. That's maybe this is something that's hurting me. Is I have 3 Exos drives that are being pulled together with storage spaces. So I don't know if storage spaces is just going to be not as reliable storage solution for as far as Adobe.
And how big is your RAID or that you would edit off of these days? What's typical for you guys?
I have 3 8 terabytes as the raw drives. I don't remember exactly what that comes out to.
I find that an 8. I mean, there's another one here I have on my desk. So these new Seagates that are coming out, these are 2 terabytes each. These things are going to go on a card that I just put 4 of them in there, right? And it turns it into a RAID. Then I have an 8 terabyte video RAID in a slot on my computer, and it is amazingly fast, right? So again, it's 8 terabyte. The other cool thing about that is I can pull that out and stick it in another machine, and I've got that drive ready to go. Not as convenient as Thunderbolt, but it's way faster. So to me, I just think that there's a lot of ways around this problem. And again, for the Windows users out there, it's cool because you have all these choices. But at the same time, if you're not into all this nerd and geeking out sort of what you can do, and you just want stuff to work, sometimes that's kind of where the Mac really kind of plays to that favor. It really depends on what side you're on. So I get that question a lot: is either one better? It's really up to the person. So
So I think we had a question from Tom. Tom, do you want to ask that question? Maybe not. He had a question.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep.
So I have just switched over from Final Cut and was getting twice the playback and render performance with my eGPU I have set up. So 5700 XT, so 8 gig on a like 2018 MacBook Pro. But I can't seem to have Premiere really take advantage of it during playback and getting stuttery frames all the time. It'll kick up into high gear once I do like an actual export, but the playback performance with it doesn't seem to be helping. And it actually gets
that is 100% correct. We only use GPU for that environment on export, and we also do it for rendering on the timeline. So when you're
okay, so I'm not doing anything wrong. It's just not optimized for playback.
Yeah, and it's not. Some of it just has to do with the way eGPU works, and unfortunately, I was a big fan of that. Obviously, I did a video on. I'm running one here. I have. I think I might have even put the Navi card in there just to see if the Mac would see it, and it did. It was kind of cool. Although it's a waste of money because the bottleneck is going to be Thunderbolt. There's too much horsepower trying to get through the Thunderbolt cable, but it will help you on the rendering time, Tom. I mean, that to me, it's still a pretty good payoff if you can save. Again, sometimes it's 4x faster, as I showed in that one slide. So
yeah, especially from just like the base crappy laptop.
Yeah, and it does work on Windows too. So Windows is actually a little less restrictive because you can actually use NVIDIA cards in an external GPU on a Windows laptop. So works.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for.
Yeah, and sorry that took so long to get to that question. I saw you pop up there. So
yeah, no worries. I guess Apple's just closer to the metal with Final Cut because they wrote it as their thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just on that topic. We over the past 2 years have worked pretty tight with Apple on Metal, and just it's really important to know that Apple, making that hardware, they want to make sure between us, Resolve, Avid, all of them, that those applications are performing as best as they can on the Mac. So they do spend a lot of time with engineering, and we've done a ton of work on Metal. Hopefully you've seen some pretty serious playback. We actually got a lot of the GPU stuff done on Metal first because Apple kind of stepped in, being right down the street, and got us a lot of what we needed to get that done. And there were some things that were definitely not done in like version 13 of Premiere to make it closer to the Metal, as you say, that absolutely helped that. And I will say they've been with us in lockstep on all the M1 stuff. They've been great to work with. Yep. So
yeah, I'll probably be upgrading later this year, so won't even need to worry about the eGPU
well, of course, the eGPU it won't even see it. So because
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
All right, I think we have time for maybe one or two more short ones. So does anybody else have any questions? Go ahead and just turn your mic on and ask away if so.
And while we're waiting, Eric, I will offer to. This is a Dell machine in the other room, and if you guys are just curious, if you go to Render Queue now, and you want to render this out, and go, you'll see this little green line here. The green line is the new multi rendering that's going on. So that's sending all the frames out. This is a pretty complex project from a TV studio that it's working on, and it's just killing it right now. And if I bring up another system, it literally takes 18 minutes on one, and it takes about 4 on this system. And this system here isn't even that great. It's an 8 core Dell desktop. So
wow,
amazing how fast multi rendering is going to be. Just to get you excited on that, and it's working really well even on M1. as Mitch was saying, that the M1 stuff. So try running the After Effects beta regardless of which platform you're on, and have some fun with that if you're an After Effects user. So,
all right.
If other people don't have questions, I do have at least one more I could ask.
Sure.
If that's
Yeah, go ahead. And then I think Kevin did real quick, because I know Kevin had a question or so. Did you have a question still, Kevin, or did it get answered? Nope, you're good. Okay. All right, go ahead, Nate. You get the last question.
All right. Is there anything that we should be thinking of if we're going to build out an external rendering station to be able to just send projects to you to do all their exporting?
So when you say external rendering, you mean like a remote AME and those types of apps?
Yeah, just so we have like about half a dozen people on our team. We have more people coming. And so it'd be nice for us to be able to just have a station that we could just send our exports to and not have to render locally. And that are all tied to the same SNS server, basically. Yeah,
there's a feature we have. It's usually more on the enterprise license side, but it's called Remote AME, that essentially will send that when you hit the Q button. If you think of it this way, Premiere actually sends it to itself, which is how it gets to AME. We have another one where a window pops up and you can type in an IP address, or you could just have it pre-selected. And when you click the button, it'll just send it. And it was great to send, Macs could send a job to a Windows machine, because now that we have ProRes on both sides, but now they're all kind of fast. But back then you could just say, well, let me just take this Mac and send the ProRes job, over to, a workstation that had a lot of cores. But that's one way to do it. I mean, the other way to do it is just watched folders too. Will work, because you can just drop a sequence into a watched folder would do that. But
and would any hardware recommendations change for that external station, or is it essentially just
no?
The same thing, because it's ultimately doing the same stuff?
It's essentially the same. I think what's also going to happen, and again, I just go back to After Effects and multi-threading and what we call multi-render. That's the game changer right there. Things will just get faster for the editors. There's a bunch of stuff coming out in Premiere. There'll be some new optimizations there as well. That'll just make things faster, as we can take advantage of newer GPU code and newer operating system code. But I mean, again, all the rules apply. I wouldn't invest in a dual processor. I would keep it at 16 core, like I was saying. All those rules. One thing that's pretty good is make sure you put a lot of RAM in there. When you have a lot of cores, you want to make sure, even especially with After Effects, there's enough RAM for each thread. It's very important. So what we call logical threads. So again, if it's 16, you really have 32 logical threads. So now you're going to be like, okay, well, if I want 2 gigs of RAM for each one, and you don't really get 2 gigs, because remember, the operating system will take some of that. So keep that in mind too, that aside from memory pairing, that you have to keep an eye on, just lots of RAM. And After Effects just loves RAM. And is it mainly After Effects or Premiere that you're building this for, or both?
Mainly Premiere. I mean, right now we do have a workstation that we're hoping to use for it. It was actually my old workstation, which it is a dual Xeon station. It's no longer my workstation because it had too many problems, and so we're hoping that we could just stick it in a closet somewhere and have that go there. That one has 256 gigs of RAM. But
what's the graphics card that's in there?
Currently, it just has a single 1080 Ti. It might get a second one, or if we need better ones, then it doesn't necessarily need to be super fast.
Here's the thing. It's probably just another one. I know, Eric, we're wrapping up, but people will, like I said, I've got 3090s here and they do great. And it's just kind of like, the difference between a 3090 and a 2080 isn't a lot, because you would have to have a very nerdy, geeky timeline that would never make it to air. As I say, it's just a performance demo. You got to ask yourself, what are you editing? And what's the difference? And I still think the 1080 is a great performer for anyone on a budget. It's a great card. 2060, 2070, 2080, solid cards. Any of the new the 3000 series is probably a better bang for your buck. The 3060, 3070, because they came out cheaper. And if you were buying fresh, I wouldn't buy anything that isn't RTX technology on the NVIDIA side, and anything that isn't the newer AMD stuff, just because, again, it's all math. So pretty much everything's optimized for RTX and the newer AMD. And again, Apple Metal, you're pretty much good to go because Apple kind of controls that. So,
all right. So we have two quick questions here. We'll like do lightning round on these, and I think I know the answers to both of them, but I'm going to ask them anyway. Is it okay to have a watch folder on OneDrive as long as you're logged in? So I'll let you answer that one first, and then the second one is, will embedded AE timelines inside of Premiere take advantage of multi-threading as well? And I think you already answered that and said
eventually, yes. Yeah. That's coming. Once we get multi-threading done, there'll be an update to Premiere for dynamic link and for preview. One of the things, by the way, you're not seeing today in your version of After Effects beta, if you're running it. So while you get the export, you don't get the butteriness on the timeline of multi-threading. So the version I'm running, which is an internal version, I get multi-threading preview and just working in the comp. That's coming to you guys in the next couple weeks. So just so you know, you're like, wow, this seems the same, except export's fast. Preview is coming. They're getting ready to turn that on for you guys, and it's pretty sweet. So I think you guys will dig that. And a couple other things. Speech to text is amazing. If you haven't seen what's coming, there's going to be what the biggest thing on speech to text that's going to be amazing. This again is transcription. We don't know 100% of the rules around this, but it's going to be free. So you're going to be able to edit by word. You won't have to pay 6 cents a minute. You have a timeline. And the accuracy is crazy good. AI is amazing. So we can certainly answer some questions on that. It'll ship with 12 languages.
Hold the phone here. So because this, I mean, the people in the group know this is like game changing because I've talked about it and I've demoed it. And for me, this is like, that tech is just so game changing. Did you just say that it's going to be free?
Part of your Creative Cloud entitlement. The one thing we don't know, just to be honest with you, is we don't know if there's going to be a cap, because you can't run a service bureau right on this. And the other thing we're working on that's really important is we want to make it available in language packs, meaning that you can run it on device, on-prem, right, without having to hit the net. So that's only going to speed things up. And I guess you've seen it, Eric. I mean, you've seen the accuracy. We've had customers complain that we don't have it as a live ingest tool yet, like for news. And I'm like, well, it wasn't really designed for that. But there's a whole new platform stuff coming for that. But yeah, it's going to be a game changer. And obviously, there's other things we want to do with language conversions and some other things that there's lots of possibilities that could come
I just used it the other day for a real world project. Did great. Actually, I've only had it screw up one time. It actually skipped one line. I had to create subtitles and it skipped. Yeah. It completely missed a line, but I'm like, okay, that's fine. I can.
Yeah, and there's a couple things for anybody that is trying to use 608. Mitch and I were just talking about this the other day. You have to actually turn on the opaque layer to get the black to pop up for closed captions. If you're trying to do closed captions for television, even in 15, which has nothing to do with the beta, the shipping version has the new caption. Remember, there's transcription, which is not released yet. It's coming very soon, by the way. And then there's the captions. So captions, I was talking engineering yesterday. I think when we just select 608 to turn a few of those options on for you by default. So they look correct. So some things there, but yeah, we can certainly answer some questions at a later point and dive in deep when that gets released, Eric. Again, there's tons of cool stuff coming, lots of cool things to share with you guys. So
I was gonna ask you, was the last question, and then we'll wrap this up. But if there was one thing that I know how this works because I'm under NDA, and obviously you guys are, so there's things you can't talk about. But if there was one thing that is coming that hasn't been released yet, but that you could somewhat tease, somewhat vaguely, without giving specifics around, that you're excited about in Premiere, is there anything that you could kind of share about?
Color change.
Yeah, well, we're revamping HDR completely, but there's a lot of things in the UI that, if you don't know someone at Adobe, you'll never discover it, right? Or if you don't do the right Google search, and that just makes me mad. Again, I run a version of Premiere. If you guys have ever seen you know, in any of my demos on Premiere here, I'll just show you. I mean, I run the original version of Premiere and Photoshop and After Effects all the time, right? So these are projects that go back to all the different versions of Premiere, and you always have, like, here's somewhere in there, there's Premiere 1 right here. I mean, this is Premiere 1. That's the original version. And there are things that you have to call out and just say, why is it so difficult? So I think the one thing that's coming is this idea of taking another look at the timeline and say, this is the type of editor I am. I want it to look like this, and to simplify things without taking the professional features away. Does that make sense? So it's like, you're always going to have that way to get the view that you need at your level versus someone else that says, you know what, I kind of like the way Premiere Rush looks because it's good for me and that's the kind of mode I'm in. But giving yourself knobs and switches to change the way things look, to me, I think that's important. And so what I'm telling you is it's more than just a workspace. There's some things that we're thinking about and playing around internally to say, this is a better way to do that. And I hinted towards some of that with some of the colors and the badges and things like that. And the other thing I'll tell you is we are revamping the UI from a performance standpoint, because technology has changed where we can throw more stuff out to the GPU just to make stuff really snappy. And some of the early builds we're seeing are pretty amazing. So I probably said too much there, but I just think things are going to get faster and snappier. Mitch, anything you want to say to get yourself in trouble?
No, you're doing fine for both of us, Dave. You go right ahead.
Good thing you and I are heading to sabbatical next month. Mitch and I are off for 2 months, taking our next set of sabbaticals. So, but yeah, that's great. There's going to be some great stuff coming. So,
awesome,
some cool things.
Well, thank you.
By the way, the PowerPoint deck is up on YouTube on the Dave Tech Table channel, Kevin. I saw that note.
Okay. Well, Dave and Mitch, thank you so much for this. I mean, we have gone way over and we've kept just about everybody on this call. So you can tell that people are interested. It's,
it's only midnight for me. So it's,
yeah, I know. Just say we need to wrap. I looked at the clock and thought about that. I'm like, holy,
that's fine.
I'm going to get him to bed. But thank you so much. I can't even express it. And next time I see you guys at NAB or Max or whatever, I am buying you both at least a beer, if not more.
Happy to do it. And we're happy to come back. If you guys want to, come back maybe towards the end of the summer when some of the new toys are out and you want to dive in a little deeper and see some product demos and then maybe do some more Q&A.
Cool, yeah.
Have at it. And by the way, what might also help, just I'm a big believer in professional associations and user groups. Feel free to send Eric questions ahead of time that are kind of bugging you too. And Mitch and I can take a look at those, and we maybe even bring another engineer on if we need, and happy to dive in deeper. I mean, one thing we're always willing to do is open the kimono and talk about. That's why we showed you dog ears today, because you don't really find that kind of stuff in most chat forums. So
I will vouch for the Adobe engineers and say that a quick little personal story. So years ago, I was editing a short film. It was over a weekend. I was super stuck. This was back. I was cutting it. It was Canon HDV. It was that 24 segmented frame nonsense that they had on some camera at some point. And Premiere wasn't working with the footage. The time code was jacked up. There was all kinds of problems. And I posted on the forums at that point that I was having a problem. And I'm trying to remember the guy's name. I was searching for the email so I could call it out. But one of the team members reached out to me, said, let me send you an MPEG importer file. He goes,
that was probably Mitch, because you did that a lot.
It probably was me. Yeah,
it might have been you. Now that I think about it, and you sent me, or whoever it was, sent me a new version of that and said, put this in, and that literally solved all my problems. Yeah. We got the film finished, and I was like, I couldn't believe it, and it was like just posting up on the forums and on a weekend, no less. Got me that and was able to save my bacon on that project.
All you were doing was helping us validate. No one wants to be beta testers unless it fixes their problem immediately when they can finish their edit. And that gives us more data points.
So I tell that story to say to everybody out there that's listening, everybody that watches the replay, if you have a problem, post in the forums, in the beta forums and the regular forums, because the Adobe engineers do read those and they do sometimes.
And don't be scared to put your phone number in on any kind of crash report that comes up, and let us know. I mean, we will do our best to call you back, because again, you're helping us.
Well, I would also share, if you do have steps to reproduce, or at least, hey, I did these 3 things and here's what blew up. That helps tremendously when we're going through and trying to read those reports and put together what the breadcrumbs are. So yeah, any of the information you can share, the better.
Always version, and operating system.
Oh, the version stuff comes through. That we don't need that. But
yeah, that's true. But in the
if you can
forum,
tell us what you were doing.
Yeah, in the forum, sometimes they and again, I can't recommend highly enough the moving to Premiere Pro forum on Facebook is a pretty good central place. So.
All right. And on that note, we will end it. Everybody, we will see you next month. Remember, our meeting is June 2nd. It's a little early. We've got Rob Ash from the Conan Show. He will be here to talk, and another super meeting that I've been trying to get organized for a long time.
Make sure he wears his Freddie Mercury shirt, the one that I got him. Tell him
send him an email and tell him to wear that and bust that out. So, all right, everybody. Thank you so much, Dave and Mitch. Again, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And,
thank you all.
We'll see you all next month. Bye-bye.